people are going to overreact to what happened in week one. We had some disappointing finishes from guys like Marvin Harrison, who we first round pick in most fantasy drafts. Really disappointed. This is an opportunity to really take advantage of the leverage you'll be able to gain.
1 week season.
All right, OWS fam, glad you are with us on the program. We are back in the lab. This is the DFS lab presented by 1 week season, where the purpose of this show is to build a DraftKings lineup and then really use that as a vehicle to talk strategy about the upcoming slate. It is probably for you, you're watching this on Thursday, September 12th, but we're recording this Wednesday late night edition around 11 p.m. Eastern time. I'm your host, Cheeseman, and I'll be with you in the lab 4 times a week. If you're joining us for the first time, here's a look at the schedule for the show. As you can see, Monday, Tuesday, it's Sandomir and Hilo. Wednesday, Mike Johnson and Maximum host that show. It is a FanDuel-focused show. You can check out the link here if you want to catch this week's show that aired today. And then Thursday and Friday, StatATL and Pappy. And as always, if you find value in this content, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. We would really appreciate it. And with that, he is StatATL, and he joins us now. Stat, my man, how are you doing? Thoughts on week one, how'd it go? And just overall impression of just how things went down in the NFL for week one.
Jeez, happy hump day to you, my friend.
Yeah, you as well. We're moving down the week now, downhill towards Sunday.
You know, it's week 2 is exciting. I think for a lot of us who have been doing this for a couple of years, it's exciting because we call it kind of like overreaction Monday, overreaction Tuesday, whatever the right term is here. But everyone comes into the season, they have their inclinations, their thoughts on what every team is going to play like. They see one game, a sample size of one, and they just, hey, this is what every team is going to do. Here's who's going to be featured in every offense.
Right.
Guys like Mark Andrews, he had a very poor game. Well, we're just going to completely write him off. It's such an overreaction that I feel like for those of us who have been doing this for a couple of years, this is one of my favorite weeks of the season because you can get such great leverage on a lot of like stud players that like just happen to have a dud week in week one, and no one wants to play them in week 2 because they've got their mind made up on these are the guys that are going to win me a tournament this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually was just looking at the slate a little bit before we got on the air and just was looking at tight end matchups and noticed that one of the best matchups, I was on a Pro Football Focus, and one of the best matchups for tight ends, and it makes sense, but Travis Kelce was at the top of the list. And I thought, well, Kelce is now, his role is diminished within the offense. And then I thought, is it really? I mean, again, it could be, but we only have a 1 week sample size, and he's there priced at DraftKings at 6,200, which feels low for him. I know his price it may have started to decrease towards the end of last season, but I'm just so used to seeing him at like the mid 7s. So there's another example that his role could be diminishing, but we only have a 1 week sample size with him, for example.
Oh yeah. It's going to be such overreactions to players that people thought were going to have these huge roles that just didn't in week 1. And people are just going to completely write them off. And then you're going to get guys who had big week 1s that, are just kind of a blip on the radar, where week 1 is going to be, they're peaked in high school week. And, week 1 is the best it's going to be. So it's kind of a balance of kind of weighing what we've learned in week 1, but also not treating it as gospel.
Absolutely. Now, you kind of do a show with 1 week season where you're reviewing lineups. So you already kind of looked back at week 1 a bit through the lens of these lineups. Tell me a little bit more about what you do on that show, just briefly, for your lineup review show.
Yeah, so kind of back by popular demand this year was the roster review show. It's something we started last year. not quite midway through, but like a third of the way through the season. Um, it was a listener suggested idea actually that we kind of ran with here at OWS, and really glowing feedback. People have really enjoyed it, and so it's back again this year. And what we do on the show is on Sunday nights, after the main slate is closed. I just kind of reach out into the Discord as a reminder, just to say, hey guys, please send me your roster and generally what I ask for is your highest dollar single entry or kind of three max build, because that's
Okay.
what you're making your biggest bet on for the week. So, I don't care if it's, a $50, $100, a $200 single entry, or if it's the $3 or $5 single entry. Like the whole point of it is to just kind of talk through the thought process, try to give some feedback, some critiques of things that maybe I would like to see you do a little bit differently. Or hey, like, every week we review, and looking back at last season, like I always do my highest dollar as well. And one of the fun little twists that we're going to do this year is, along with myself, we're going to review a roster from one of the OWS contributors. Last week we did Mike Johnson. I think this week we're going to look at high low. I was chatting with JM earlier. He's going to submit one, and I think you actually were game to
Yes.
participate. So all year we're going to look at one of my rosters, another one of the contributors, and then at least a dozen of the subscriber rosters that get submitted. Last week I got close to 50, which was actually close to a record. Might have been a record. I think last year we got like 46, 47 was the record. This year, I think on Monday I had 49. So really awesome, participation from our subscribers. And we just kind of talk through the process of reviewing and thinking through the roster. One of the things that we really preach at OWS is reflection, and reflecting on your process, not just the results. Like, oh, this roster
That's
did
key.
really
Yeah.
great. I must have really had a great, build this week. And while that can be true, we really look at trying to break down the roster of, hey, like, what was the thought process here? Are we using good leverage? Like, the what do you win when you win mentality. Like, did this roster have a chance for first place? And last season, we looked at rosters, even just the ones that I submitted. We looked at Binks. We looked at some winning lineups that I had, and we looked at, I think one week we looked at a roster where I literally finished like second or third to like dead last. And it was just like, well, this roster performed freaking terribly. But here was the thought process. And I think that if we put this lineup in play 100 weeks of this same slate, like, it wins. Like, and this is why I think it could win. And so that's what we try to review. I think you mentioned you may throw the link to week one's
Yeah, it'll be
stream
up. It'll be up.
podcast.
Just check it out right now. I'm just pointing up the link it'll be in the show notes below to your this week's show, and then it'll be in the video that they can just click straight through as well. The
Jeez,
wonders of YouTube.
dude, that's awesome. So if you're an OWS subscriber, an Inner Circle subscriber, and that is news to you, and you're checking out this show today for the first time, that's awesome. Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord, StatATL, on Sunday or a Monday morning. Shoot me over your roster. Preferably, it's a single entry or a three max in one of your higher dollar. Doesn't matter what that figure is, but it's kind of like, this was my best bet for the week. Um, you know, if you want to send me your highest scoring roster, that's fine too. However, you really learn so much more from, honestly, your bad rosters, or kind of what you're making your best bet on, and we can kind of talk through the thought process behind it, and I'll give you some feedback of, hey, you've got a great stack here, but your other six guys are completely uncorrelated, and maybe we want to look at doing this or that. And a lot of times I'll kind of say, hey, like, this past week you had James Conner on this roster, or Joe Mixon, and he did really well. But actually, for this roster, for it to have a better chance at getting to the top, you probably want to consider X, Y, or Z guy who this week he may have flopped. And well, if I had done that, Billy, I wouldn't have min cashed. Well, min cash isn't the goal. We're trying to
Right.
get to the top. So the goal is to kind of learn from each other, learn from the process. And so really
Love
great
it.
shout out there for Cheese. I'd love for our subscribers to continue to take advantage of it. I know it's been a big hit. But yeah, looking back at week one, we had some really great successes from subscribers. Um, I know we had I believe it was like $100,000 hit. We had a couple of takedowns from subscribers, from contributors this week. So really great week, and I'm expecting week two to be just as strong.
Yeah, I'm excited for week two, and I agree with you. Week one, you really had some great performances by the OWS subscriber base, the OWS fam, as we like to call it. So let's jump into week two here. Give me your 10,000-foot thoughts on week two. What do you think of this week as we get set to start building this lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of high level as just to reiterate a little bit, I feel like people are going to overreact to what happened in week one. And we had some really strong performances from players that we thought were going to do well. And then we had some disappointing finishes from, guys like Marvin Harrison, who we first round pick in most fantasy drafts, really disappointed. Guys like Mark Andrews, who generally were one of the top two or three tight ends off the board. Um, I feel like this is an opportunity to really take advantage of the leverage you'll be able to gain at guys who are in good situations this week, but just didn't have a super strong week one performance. So just high level, that's how I'm evaluating it. The OWS subscribers will know that on Tuesdays I kind of put out a Tuesday first thought into Instagram into the Discord. I think it gets pushed out onto X, aka Twitter, for us old folks on Wednesdays, where I kind of share. I like to kind of give a first look, like a breakdown. I go game by game. I kind of share my thoughts, and as the season progresses, like it'll get more detailed. It'll have more stats, aka StatATL. That's what I like, or stats. But 1 week sample size. It's just it's really not as pertinent as it'll be later into the season. So
Exactly. Well, cool. Let's jump into DraftKings here, and let's start doing what we love. Let's start doing our favorite thing: building lineups. What are you thinking for this one in terms of field size? We want to go three max. We want to go large field. What do you think?
well, I know that on Tuesdays, Hilo always does a DFS lab. The two of you guys do an awesome job with that. But I'm pretty sure he built for like the 555 milli, which is a larger field contest. I'd like to continue to stick with the things that I've had success with, which are those single entry, those three max, generally somewhere in that 4 to 5 to 8 to 10,000 range. So, we could look at the $12 single entry. We could look at the $50 single entry.
Yeah, let's
These are all
jump into
contests.
the
68
50.
people, that's too small. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
that's way too
we
small.
could certainly pick anything and just kind of go.
Let's go the 12 with the biggest 12, the fair catch with the 20,000 entries, or we could do
Yeah, I
the
like that. That's a contest I've won
do
before.
it.
Let's play one of those. So in a contest like this, I believe this is the larger of the fair catches, so it's closer to like 18 to 20,000. So it's not a super small field tournament where you're really concerned a little bit more with floor than you are with ceiling. This is with about 20,000 folks. Like you're really looking for ceiling outcomes on a lot of your players. Um, and so it's kind of, again, embracing that mentality of what do you win when you win. So generally, like, we want to target good game environments, but if we have guys that are going to be 30-40% owned, the once you get into this 15-20,000 person contest or larger, to me this is generally when you want to be kind of thinking about the leverage that you gain from moving away from one of these super owned chalky guys. And again, it's Wednesday. We don't even have initial ownership yet. So we don't know who these super chalky guys are for sure going to be. But for example, I know you and I were just briefly chatting off air before we hopped on. Like, it's looking like Christian McCaffrey is doubtful, unlikely to play. Well, if he doesn't play, Jordan Mason at whatever he's at, 5,000, 5,200, he's going to be uber chalk
Yeah.
based on what he did on Monday Night Football. At a guy that we're expecting to probably touch the ball 20 to 25 times at 5,200, he's going to be uber chalk. So once you get to a tournament like this, I'm not saying that you can't play him. And in the lineup that we may build on stream, we may plug him in. But you have to be conscious of, okay, I'm playing Jordan Mason in this contest, for example. Well, I got to realize that 30-40% of the field may also be playing Jordan Mason. So if I get a great game out of him, I'm not really doing much to the field. It's not like if you get that 30-point game out of the guy that's 2 or 3% owned, and that's a had to have it type score. Well, now, 2% of 20,000 is what, 400 people. Like, now this tournament is like super condensed. But if Jordan Mason is 40% owned, this is a different story. You know what I mean? You're still competing with thousands of people. So you just got to be conscious of, this is the type of tournament I'm playing in, and this is what I'm doing for my lineup by clicking Jordan Mason. Where, if San Francisco, Minnesota, for example, is a game that you want to target and you think it's got a high scoring environment, looking to pivot to one of the wide receivers or to George Kittle, you know what I mean? Saying, hey, I don't think San Francisco is going to fail, but I'm going to bet the points maybe come through the air instead of through Jordan Mason. Maybe he goes for 100 yards rushing and he gets 3 catches for 30 yards, but he doesn't catch a touchdown or doesn't rush for a touchdown. So, maybe he's getting 15, 16, 17 points. That's a strong score, but at 5,200, like, 17 points is not like a had to have it score. At
Yeah.
5,200, like 30 points is a had to have it score. 25 to 30 is a really strong score. So it doesn't mean he's got to fail, Jordan Mason. It's just that he's not smashing.
Yeah, and this is going to be a big discussion point throughout the week, because whenever you have a situation like this, people start to just they kind of go on either side of it. Either, you play him and you just take the free square, or you just try to think about ways to be contrarian, ways to be different, and there's so much talk about it that it can almost get to that point by the end of the week that you're just. I mean, I've been in situations before where it's talked about so much that I almost am like, I just have heard it so much, I feel like I don't even want to play him anymore. But for Jordan Mason, you're exactly right. 15 points for him. He had 28 carries against the Jets, but he only had 1 target. And so if he doesn't get a rushing touchdown and he's not really targeted in the passing game and gets 15, that's still a solid floor piece, and it gives you flexibility for your lineup. But there's going to be running backs, probably multiple, that outscore him. And so it really does become a question where you have to ask yourself, like, can he get 25 to 30 again? And then do the Niners, do they give him all the carries, or do they look at other backs as well? So anyway, we don't have to spend all our time on the Jordan Mason situation, but because I guarantee we'll hear a lot about it all week. But your point is well taken.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's Wednesday. We don't have all the news, but upon very first look, and again, we're super early in the week, but right now, if I was building a roster right now, there are kind of 3 main kind of decision points, inflection points, kind of things that you need to consider basically on every roster, in my opinion. And the first is probably Jordan Mason. If CMC doesn't play, what are you doing with Jordan Mason? He's probably, if today was the end all be all and the game started in 2 hours and we had this news and CMC isn't playing, Jordan Mason is 30-35% owned, probably. Again, we aren't looking at ownership projections. I'm just kind of talking from years of experience. He's one of, if not the highest owned player.
Yep.
then I think your other two kind of main reflection points are both at wide receiver, and they're both expensive guys. Um, but I think your first kind of decision point at wide receiver is all the way at the top. I think all the way at the top is Ceedee Lamb. So
Yeah.
Ferguson likely to miss with a knee injury, and if he is out against New Orleans, Dallas, I think last half of the season, highest pass rate over expectation of any team in the league, and that kind of continued week one, very pass happy. Well, if their number two option in Jake Ferguson is out, it's just more targets for Ceedee Lamb. And I think if you took Price away, Ceedee Lamb probably the betting favorite in my mind to lead the slate in terms of raw points. So that's kind
Yeah.
of a decision point. If Ferguson is out, what do you do with Ceedee Lamb? I know he's the most expensive player on the slate, but he's also kind of like Tyreek Hill last season, and that ended up basically coming to fruition in terms of skill position. Like he was the likeliest player to give you that 30-point score, and I think he ended with like 29 points. But I think he was one of, if not the top, he was one of the top two or three in terms of raw points. So
Yeah.
that's likely the same situation with Ceedee Lamb. And I don't know that he'll garner the same ownership as Tyreek did last week because pricing it's not tight, but it's a little tighter than last week. So it's not just do whatever you want, but he's kind of a decision point. And
Yeah.
then with Puka Nakua getting put on IR for the Rams, and this pricing coming out before the Nakua injury,
Right.
um, like
That's key.
Cooper Kupp is 7,600. He's borderline like an auto just plug into your lineup. So to me, those are the three kind of decision points that you need to be evaluating on your roster. And all three of those guys, CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp, Jordan Mason, they're all going to have elevated ownership this week. I don't know what it'll be. It's just Wednesday, but they're all likely to be elevated probably 15, 20, 30% or more. Maybe not all three of them 30%, but they'll all be highly owned players.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And Jam Twin says this all the time. Whether you play them or not, you can't just forget about them. I think you're saying this. You have to account for them. If I don't play CeeDee Lamb, then what am I saying? Am I saying he just completely fails? Probably not. So if I don't play CeeDee Lamb and he doesn't have a good game, where do the points come from for Dallas, given that they are at home? So all that to say, though, do you want to make decisions on those players now? For example, Jordan Mason, whether or not you want to plug them in here, or do you want to look at kind of your, I guess, primary stack if you want to go with the stack for this lineup as we get this going?
Yeah, well, let's kind of account for at least one or two of them. So I think the best value of all three of them is probably Jordan Mason if we assume that Christian McCaffrey is going to miss. So let's just say there's no such thing as a free square in daily fantasy, but let's call him the highest likelihood to bet and to pay off his price tag at 5,200. Where I feel like even if you get a bad game out of Jordan Mason, knock on wood, assuming no injury, like a bad game out of Jordan Mason is probably like 80 yards, no touchdowns, and like two catches for 20 yards. It's probably 12 to 13 points. Like that doesn't kill you
Right.
at 53, 5,200. If you get 13 points out of CeeDee Lamb, that wrecks you because you're just allocating so much salary. So let's go Jordan Mason here. And then let's try to account for one of those other guys, and let's look at the Rams. So this is a team where I feel like they were already in seasons past like a very concentrated offense, and it's only going to get even more consolidated without Puka Nakua. So most of the field is going to bet on Cooper Kupp. Let's not bet on Cooper Kupp. And let's say on this particular build, what happens if, the points come on the ground? So instead, I want to pencil in Kyron Williams here. So, I feel like he's in line to probably see somewhere between 20 to 25 opportunities between targets and rushes. And at 6,800, I'm willing to kind of bet um, that the odds of like he's probably going to be a third of the ownership of Cooper Cup. So,
Yeah.
or maybe not. I don't know. I'm literally just spitballing here, but it's
I mean, I think
definitely going to
that's
be a lot.
reasonable.
Definitely going to be a lot less. So, um, and let's kind of double down on that bet. So they're still going to throw the ball, and let's take a look at either Colby Parkinson, Ty Johnson. Maybe we look at Demarcus Robinson on this build. Let's take a look at one of their lower options, and maybe we just pencil in Demarcus Robinson here. He was the number 3 guy all
Okay.
last year. He had some big spike weeks towards the end of the year, putting up 15, 20. I think he got up to like 22, 25 points. I mean, that's a huge score. If he has one of those type of weeks at 4,000, that's a 5x, 6x score. That's huge. So
Yeah.
I think that I really like this game environment between the Rams and the Cards. And so let's just bet on the points coming a little bit differently. I don't think this game is going to go overlooked by the field, but I think most people are going to focus on Cooper Cup. So, and let's kind of build around this here with Kyron Williams and Demarcus Robinson, and let's grab a card. And for me, I think the Cardinal with the best matchup, who I think is going to potentially go a little overlooked, is at the tight end position. And let's look at Trey McBride here.
I
Um,
played a bit of Trey McBride, actually quite a bit in this past weekend. I
yeah,
like the play. So I'm saying I honestly like, I think Arizona's offense really has the potential. They were starting to show glimpses last season. And so obviously we still don't know, but I think that there's a good chance that Arizona can have some offensive success, especially here. I love taking quarterbacks at home
yeah,
and
yeah.
or just
So
offenses at home.
yeah, I mean, so let's double down on that bet, and let's take a quarterback here at home. So let's build a stack here with Trey McBride and Kyler, and so this kind of gives us a bit of a game stack. We're taking a rushing quarterback, guy with rushing upside. I
Yep.
think Kyler had 50 or so rushing yards last week. We know
Yeah.
it's something that's in his is certainly 57. So in his range of outcomes to give you 40, 50 yards rushing, obviously you have the opportunity for a rushing score. Um, and so I really like this. We're kind of betting on a rushing quarterback, probably grabbing his likely 1A, 1B target in Trey McBride, kind of to be determined if that's Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison as the season progresses. And then we're
Right.
running it back with both Kyron and Demarcus Robinson. Like, I really like this. I feel like this is going to be a really low owned game stack to build it this way and not include Cooper Cup.
Yeah, it definitely. So that leaves us. Okay, we got defense, which last week on the show we talked about a couple of defenses that absolutely blew up this past weekend. The Vikings among those. So that was some good talking points last weekend
Yeah,
or
man. I
last
think we
weekend.
talked
What am I
about
saying? Last Thursday.
yeah. I think we mentioned what 2 or 3 defenses on stream last week, and of those, let's say 3 to be conservative, just to make sure that we're not overplaying our hand here. I think we nailed the top 2 defenses out of our 3 between the Bears and the Vikings last week. Were the kind of the 2 we talked through. So let's try to do that again this week.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, so let's plug in a D. I think last week we kind of talked through my process. I like to go position by position. I like to identify as it relates to defense, like 5 to 6 that I really like. Generally, like 1 to 2, 33, 3,400 or more. 1 to 2, kind of in that 27 to 3,300 range, and then kind of a cheapie. So I always like to start with kind of like that mid, like around 3,000 is like a placeholder.
Yes,
That way I can
I like that
borrow a
too.
couple hundred if I need, or I can, go up to a defense if I have a couple hundred extra. And so I kind of think in that mid range, my favorite defense is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They really stymied the Dolphins. I think they held them to 20 points last week. They looked really strong. They had pressure, and honestly, like Deshaun Watson looked like I believe the Asian term is the poo poo plata. Um, yeah, like I am all about the Jaguars this week. They are probably my favorite defense. Forget about Price. So at home facing Cleveland, who's coming off a disappointing loss, like they got a lot of pressure, and pressure is where points come from on D. So I really like doing that, and this leaves us a little over 6,000 a position. So
Right.
um,
Decent amount of flexibility. I like it.
for sure. So looking at this, obviously we've got our bet around the Rams and the Cardinals, and we plugged in Jordan Mason into this lineup. And so for those of the listeners, subscribers that participate in my roster reviews, they know how much I preach and love correlation. So let's get some correlation here with Jordan Mason. And we've got the salary. So let's go ahead and throw in Justin Jefferson. Um, I feel like this week has the opportunity to be the Justin Jefferson show. Just speaking from Wednesday, Jordan Addison did not practice today. He left the game early last week with an ankle injury. If he were to miss, to me, Justin Jefferson is in a smash spot here. San Francisco very likely to be putting up points here on Minnesota, putting them in a position where they've got to throw more. Justin Jefferson's the guy that could command 12 to 15 targets in this situation. So I really like this piece. Still leaves us with 5,000 a spot. And I like what we're doing here. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I like Justin Jefferson. He was low owned last week and could have put up a bigger game. And I mean, for the sake of this lineup, I guess we're glad that he didn't because again, I think you could see him come in with lower ownership and I think that pairing of Jefferson and Mason is like I don't think many people will make that pairing. So that also differentiates. It takes a chalky piece, but then makes it different.
yeah, I agree, and I like to. To me, I'm always preaching of like a tight player pool and betting on betting on specific games. You could build a lineup with 9 uncorrelated pieces, but you could also go to the gas station and just play the lottery because that's what you're doing when you're just
Yeah,
literally throwing 9 darts. But if that's what you like to do, that's great, and I hope that you continue to enter the contest that Cheese and I are in because you could still win, but it's very unlikely that you're going to get that 9 combination lock right.
that's
So
right. May the odds ever be ever in your favor. So yeah, 5K left a piece. So you got a wide receiver and then a flex. So you can go running back or receiver here in that flex position, of course.
yeah, so I'm thinking of game environments that I really like, and maybe we want to pick on some defenses that I don't want to say that we know because we've got a 1 game sample size, but last week I think the team that got absolutely curb stomped the most was the Carolina Panthers. So
Yeah,
I would I
some
would
people.
love to find a piece to pick on Carolina. So Carolina's playing the Chargers. So let's navigate over to the flex position and just look at the Chargers options. They're playing in a 1 o'clock game against Carolina.
Oh,
So
right. Okay, so let me go over to there we go.
oh man, top of the board, J.K. Dobbins, man. I know he had limited opportunities last week. I think he only had 13 touches of the ball, but he turned those 13 touches into like 140 yards and a touchdown. So while he split the backfield work with Gus Edwards week 1, um, you know, Harbaugh is a smart coach, coming off of a national championship at Michigan. He's going to see who was much more effective with the ball. And I think this is kind of an opportunity for us to kind of I don't want to say be early because I had like 30% J.K. Dobbins last week.
Look at
Um,
you. Nice work.
but yeah, I mean, I feel like this is an opportunity for us to bet on an expanded role from J.K. Dobbins against a backfield, just a team in general that just got absolutely gashed last week. So let's throw J.K. Dobbins into this lineup and see what that leaves us.
Now, real quick, do you want me to just, since he's playing at 1, slide Williams down to the flex since he's playing at 415, give that extra flexibility?
Cheese, it's like you've been watching my lineup review shows, man. You know what I want to do. As the
Okay.
guy who writes the late swap article, I want to make sure that our latest guy is in our flex position. So I love that. I love that shout.
Okay.
Dobbins,
So,
I
and
think,
then
was
Williams into the
5,400.
flex. Okay. So that gives
Yeah,
us, okay,
perfect.
4,600 left for a receiver. Let me scroll down to what we have available here. And you
Yeah, so I
got,
mean, we could look at some additional correlation. We could consider a Carolina piece to pair with J.K. Dobbins. Um, we're 100 off of Xavier Leggett, the rookie who kind of led the Panthers in snap percentage last week. So we could move off the Jaguars. Um,
but does anyone want to touch the Panthers this week? I just don't know. I don't think so.
no, I don't really think that that's where I want to go. Um, I think that I do want to target a little bit this New Orleans Dallas game. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that we can really afford a Dallas piece. Obviously, we can't get to Lamb. I don't think we could get to Brandon Cooks. What's Brandon Cooks' salary?
Let's see if I can just
Yep, there he is. He's
56. Yeah, he's always around
5,600.
that kind of
So he's
mid
a
fives
thousand.
range.
We'd have to be completely punting at D. Yeah, I don't think I want to do that. So maybe from this same game, a guy that I've been high on all offseason in best ball. Let's go Shaheed. Let's go Rashid Shaheed here, stepping into that wide receiver 2 role. Um, led the Saints in yards and snaps. I think last in week 1, and he's a guy that at 4,600 is offering you that 20-point ceiling, that close to that 5x ceiling. And I kind of like him here in this lineup. So
I
we've
do
kind
too.
of
And
got 3-4 main bets again this week, and hopefully we nail the defense again this week like we did last week.
that's right. That's right. Yes. I like the correlation. I like the Shaheed pick just because New Orleans, they're going to know that they're going to need to put up points to stay in this game. And so they're going to have to stay aggressive. They're not going to be able to just milk the clock and slow things down. So, yeah, I love this stat. It's looking good. Hey, as we close this show out, final thoughts as we get set to ship this one.
No, I think I'll continue to kind of reiterate how hard DFS is, and just to make sure that you're continuing to stay within your bankroll. As we're at the beginning of a season, it's obviously it's exciting. Most of us have been waiting. If you didn't play best ball, if you weren't a DGen in those streets, as they say, you're super excited about week 1, week 2, and just remember to stay disciplined and realize that you really don't want to be putting in more than, let's say, 10% of your season long allocation of funds, whatever that number be. Maybe that number is, hey, $500 for the whole season, so I'm going to play 25, $50 a week. Or if that's thousands, hey, I'm only going to put a couple hundred in play. Just making sure that you're being conscious of your bankroll and give yourself the ability to enjoy DFS all 18 weeks season long.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Absolutely. Don't blow your stack in the first 2 weeks. But yeah, seriously, it is bankroll management. It's a huge part of the game with DFS. So Stat, thanks so much for joining us here on the DFS Lab. Love this build. And again, make sure to check out StatATL, his lineup review videos coming out every single week on Mondays. Mondays, right?
Yep, Mondays, and then the first looks on Tuesdays. And then
All
you and
right.
I here on Wednesday or Thursday.
That's right. That's right. He's StatATL. Thanks for joining us, Stat in the DFS Lab. We'll talk to you guys next time.